Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through Holy Week. And today we are talking about Good Friday. Now, there are a lot of things that happen on Good Friday that are of note and worth taking a look at. And so we're going to try to walk through a little bit of the timeline of what happens here. So bear with me, and if I make a mistake on it, my apologies. But like I said, there was kind of a lot to do, and so I hopefully put together a timeline that will make sense to you. Now, Good Friday actually starts. Now, remember, the way the Jewish days work is that Passover actually starts at sundown. So on Good Friday at 6 p.m., we're going to work backwards a little bit, is when Jesus was laid in the tomb prior to 6 p.m., okay? Because that's when the Sabbath started, was at sundown, and they would not be able to go back out to Jesus' tomb until sun up on Sunday, okay? So some of what's happening on Good Friday, you can debate whether it is actually happening on Thursday or on Friday. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it happens. And here's kind of the timeline that we can extrapolate from really all four books of the gospel, okay? We're going to see examples in John chapter 18. We're going to see Mark 14, Matthew 26 and 27. We're going to see Luke chapter 22 and 23. There's a lot going. So let's just kind of dig in and dive in and see what we get. Okay, so the first thing that happens is that Jesus is arrested sometime on what we would consider Thursday night, okay? We don't exactly know what time that is, but we do know that it was something that was likely put together very last minute based upon what Judas had told them, okay? And Judas came and he went to the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders, and he said, okay, this is where Jesus is, here's where he is. So they get together a group. We know that it includes some Roman soldiers, but they didn't have swords, they had clubs. So there could have been some last minute stuff going on. So they arrested Jesus, and they took Jesus to Annas, who is a former high priest, and he is the father-in-law of the current high priest, Caiaphas. All right. So they go before Annas, and they're in Annas's place for some reason. So they go before Annas, okay, and they have a conversation. Annas obviously doesn't like the conversation that had happens, and so then they are led sometime that night over to the Sanhedrin court. Now, that accounting is found the first one, by the way, is found in John chapter 18, okay? This next one happens in Mark 14. You can also see it in Matthew 26 and also Luke 22 when they are brought, when false witnesses are brought before Jesus, okay? This is when he's asked if he's the Christ, if he's the Son of God, and he responds positively, okay? You remember we talked about this a few weeks ago on our daily walk through the scriptures, our one-year walk through the Bible in Matthew, when Jesus basically says, I am all three of those things. I am the Son of God, I am the Son of Man, I am the Christ. Okay, so now at this point, he's accused of blasphemy, okay? And he is mocked and beaten at this point. So his first beating happens Thursday night for us, okay? Then after that happens, this is also, by the way, when Peter begins to deny Christ. So we've got a lot happening here, okay? The denial of Christ begins here. So then Jesus is brought before the full Sanhedrin sometime early Friday morning, okay? And it's during this time that this is three of the Gospels, the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all come and mention this phase of the trial. So it's found in Mark chapter 15, in Matthew chapter 27, and the later part of Luke chapter 22. Okay, and this is... Luke is a little different because he actually records Jesus' confession yet again, similar to Mark and Matthew's the night before. So in one of these two meetings is when Jesus says, this is what's happening. But we went with the second meeting because it was backed up more by Mark and Matthew. Make sense? Okay, so these are the three Jewish trials that have happened, okay? At this point, the Sanhedrin has decided this guy is going to die. So they know that they can't do it by themselves. It has to be a Roman thing. So they take him to Pilate early Friday morning. And as Jesus goes and visits with Pilate, he asks, are you the king of the Jews? To which Jesus, he replies in a positive manner. He replies in a way that we look at and go, well, that could have been, but Jesus is essentially saying yes. Okay? And then, according to John, by the way, this is when Jesus talks about his kingdom being not of this world. So you find that first time with Pilate in Mark 15, Matthew 27, Luke 23, and then John 18. Okay? So that's where we're at. And then, so at that point, Pilate doesn't really find anything wrong with him. He might think Jesus is a little crazy because of what he said, but then he takes him over to Herod Antipas. This is not the same Herod that you see at the birth of Jesus. That was 2 Herods ago, okay? So now we have Herod Antipas, and he was really looking forward to meeting Jesus because he thought, hey, I've heard a lot about Jesus. So in Luke 23, we see this encounter, and Herod Antipas actually is quite disappointed in his encounter with Jesus, so much so that he has Jesus beaten yet again. That's his second beating at this point, okay? So then Herod says, you know what, I don't want anything to do with him, and he sends him to Pilate. This is the encounter that most of us are familiar with, because this is the one where he follows up with the tradition of releasing a prisoner, and they say, release Barabbas, and then they want Jesus crucified. And at that point, Jesus washes his hands. Now, a couple things happen during this scene, okay? Now, remember, at this point, Peter has denied Jesus. He's begun his denial process, and when the sun comes up on Friday morning, he has denied Jesus, okay? Also, Pilate's wife says she has a dream, and she says, don't do anything to this man. Don't hurt him or anything. Pilate thinks by washing his hands, he is going to be free of that, but he doesn't. So this then begins another beating of Jesus. This is when the mocking happens. This is when the crown of thorn is placed upon his brow. And this is when he then has to carry his cross all the way down to Golgotha, the place of stones, or the place of skulls. And around 9 a.m. is when Jesus begins the crucifixion process. At noon, Scripture tells us that it gets dark. Okay, like an eclipse, like what we're going to have here, but it remains dark for the next several hours. Okay, and only a few hours later is when Jesus dies. Now, this is unusual for a crucifixion because usually they can go on for ages and ages and ages. Yet, because of the reality of Passover about to happen, or excuse me, not Passover, of the Sabbath about to happen, they decide to speed the process up. And that's why the legs of the other 2 prisoners are broken. But when they get to Jesus, they find that Jesus had already passed away. Now, there are a lot of accountings that happen in the crucifixion of Jesus. We have 7 phrases that Jesus uses. Okay, each one of these phrases shows Jesus' humanity, also the purpose of why he's there, and it ultimately shows and demonstrates that he truly is the Son of God, as one of the Roman centurions have. Okay, and so we don't, unfortunately, we're running really long in this video. My apologies, but like I said, there was a lot here. My encouragement to you is to look up those 7 different phrases and see how they come into play when it comes to Jesus. But the one that we're going to end with is the last one. That is the one where he says, "It is finished." That was a cry not only of, hey, I'm done. It was a cry of victory, of everything that Jesus had set out to do had been accomplished. Every single bit of it. And that is a great way to end Good Friday. We'll see you tomorrow.